How are you? I'm Agustina Elena, a bartender for about 10 years now. Nowadays, I have my bar, sofa, and today I'm going to prepare 3 levels of Caipiroska. The classic one, the one we all know, mashing the lime and sugar. Another one for a bit more bosses, and the third one for the ultra super bosses. Let's go. First of all, as I mentioned, we're going to start with the classic Caipiroska. What is Caipiroska? Caipiroska is a classic cocktail by this point in the game. It was born around the 1970s as a contemporary variant of the traditional caipirinha. What is the basic difference between caipirinha and Caipiroska? Basically, the alcoholic base. The caipirinha is made from a sugarcane distillate, the cachaça, and the Caipiroska is vodka, as the name itself says, right? First of all, what we're going to do is cut a lime into about 8 pieces. It's important that we remove the tips to get rid of the pith. I call it cuticle because I forget the word pith. But, well, the truth is that it gives us a very bitter taste that we don't like, so it's important that the tips are out once we have the lime cut into small squares inside the shaker. And now we are going to move on to the sugar, normal sugar, white sugar in this case. But it is something very personal. What I do with the sugar is to refine it a little bit. I pass it a little bit through the blender so that it is finer without becoming impalpable. But this is what it is going to allow me. Is to create a much more homogeneous mixture and not be there feeling the grain of sand that honestly doesn't fit me. How much sugar to add? Approximately about 15 grams, 3 tablespoons. This also depends a bit on each person's taste, if you like it sweeter, more citrusy, but to standardize, we stick with 15 grams. And now the moment to unload all the troubles. You have to crush a lot. The idea here is to dissolve the sugar with the acidity of the lime. So we have the lime crushed with the sugar. What's next? The vodka. Vodka is a triple distilled grain spirit with completely neutral aromas, neutral flavor, which gives us a lot of versatility when it comes to combining it with different fruits and so on. How much vodka are we going to use? 45 milliliters. It's important that the ingredients are fresh in the case of the lime and that the vodka is good. Within the basic principles of cocktail making, the product is key. It's like in cooking, we need fresh products. In this case, we need a vodka that is of good quality. Why? Because first, we don't want it to completely burn our throat. We want to enjoy all the nuances, the warmth that vodka gives us in this case, and because we also want to be alive tomorrow, and it's super important. So take care of yourselves and don't be cheapskates. We have the vodka, we have the lime, we have the sugar. What's missing? The ice is missing. We're going to use crushed ice in this case, and we're going to shake it. Why do we use crushed ice? It said that it's a cocktail that's made in a very hot area. We're talking about Brazil, so the crushed ice is going to give us a lot more freshness and more excess water as well. So if you'll excuse me, let's shake it. What is the correct way to shake?
A constant and strong circular motion.
And now a very cold glass. In this case, I keep the glasses in the refrigerator so that they are very cold and so that the temperature difference does not generate an excess of water when the ice melts. And now to decorate, we are going to make a beautiful little lime wedge. Why do we add the little lime wedge up here? Apart from it looking beautiful, the aroma is completely important for the taste. What we can perceive as taste is sweet, sour, salty. That's all the mouth perceives. Everything else is aroma. 80% of the taste is aroma. They are volatile particles that when combined we perceive as taste. Cheers. Let's go with level 2 of the Caipiroska, a caipi for bosses. What's the difference with the classic one? In this case, instead of mashing the sugar with the lime, we're going to make a lime cordial. What is a lime cordial? Nowadays, we call cordials to syrups, sweet drinks that are used to give more complexity to cocktails in a single ingredient. They are basically composed of sugars, acids, salt, and you can add the flavor you want, fruits, herbs, whatever you can think of.
So here we go.
Now let's start with the cordial. First, we need 200 milliliters of syrup. We're going to add it to a small glass that will then blend. We're going to add a saline solution that I have at 20%. What does this mean? That I diluted 20 grams of salt in 80 milliliters of water. We're going to add 15 drops. We already have the syrup. We already have the salt. We're going to add 5 grams of lime zest. And finally, we're going to add 10 grams of synthetic acid. What are we going to do now?
We're going to blend this thoroughly.
And the next thing we're going to do is bottle it. It's important that when we bottle it, we pass it through a filter, whichever one you have. You don't need to use this typical cocktail one, but any that you have for tea, even a cloth one for coffee also works. This is to eliminate any solid particles that may have been left, especially from the lime peel. And that's it. This is ready to use. We don't have to wait for anything. It's already cold. It's already screaming at us to make caipi. Now that we have our cordial ready, let's make our caipi for bosses. Glass, we're going to use the same one, the classic Caipiroska glass, a short glass, typical for whiskey, very cold. We repeat again. In this case, we won't shake it. We'll make it directly in the glass. Why? Because in this case, we have the same densities. We are working everything on liquid. That is, we don't need that strong shake to homogenize our mix. We're going to start again with 45 milliliters of vodka. In this case, in the case of caipiroscas or caipirinhas, we are talking about cocktails that belong to the sour family. What is the sour family? These are cocktails where we use citrus and sugars to create balance. What is the general ratio for making sour cocktails or for a caipi? 2-1-1. What does this mean? It means we're going to use 2 parts vodka, 1 part sugar, and 1 part lemon. In this case, since I have a cordial, I already have the balance of sweetness and citrus in a single ingredient. Therefore, in this case, we're going to tweak that rule a bit and do 2 parts vodka to 1 part of our lime cordial.
That is, if I used 45 milliliters of vodka, we're going to use 22.5 of our lime cordial.
Let's integrate our mix a little bit and above all, taste it. Wonderful. It's very important to taste the cocktails before adding the ice, because once we add the ice, that's when the clock starts ticking. We must prepare everything before our cocktail starts to water down as the ice melts. If I taste it beforehand, I can tell if I messed up with any ingredient. We're never safe from the possibility that the lime might arrive in a somewhat bad state. About the time to realize it is before adding the ice. Now that we've seen that it's wonderful, let's add the ice. Just like the classic caipi, we're going to use crushed ice or broken ice precisely to give it this water dilution and to make the cocktail very fresh. There are many people who say that bartenders put a lot of ice to skim on the alcohol. It's terrible that they say that. It's not true. Why do we put a lot of ice? Because we need the cocktail to stay very cold. If I put a little ice, the liquid that I add will cause all that ice to dilute and the cocktail to become completely water. That's why I have to put a lot in so that the cold is greater than the liquid ingredient that I'm adding. So I beg you, please don't make us sadder because you hurt our hearts by saying those things. And to finish our Capos Caipi, so we're going to finish with a little bit of lime zest to give it all these essential oils we talked about from the classic caipi. In this case, we're going to put it in the decoration so that it explodes with aroma in our face. And now, yes. Tell me if this isn't for bosses. I'm going to end up exhausted today. The freshness is really well maintained compared to the classic caipirinha. You drink this and declare it's a caipirinha. But really, because it's so clean and doesn't have pulp, you could drink 1,000. And the aroma that the lime zest gives off instantly, really, when you drink this caipirinha, all the flavors explode. It's tremendous. Make it. Level 3 of the Caipiroska has arrived. The caipi for the super ultra cool people, the elevated ones. What are we going to do in this case? We're going to make a citrus cordial. We're going to use different acids to give more complexity and depth to our cocktail. We're going to make a raspberry tincture and we're going to finish it with a lime foam. Apart from this, we're going to use a different vodka. We're going to start by making the citrus cordial. How will we prepare the citrus cordial? First, we're going to make a basic syrup that is equal parts of sugar and water. We're going to start with 200 milliliters of water. We're going to add 200 grams of sugar. And we're going to combine different acids, citric acid on one hand and malic acid. We're going to put 15 grams of citric acid, and on the other hand, we're only going to add 3 grams of malic acid. We take this to the heat. We're going to bring it to medium heat. We're going to stir well so that the initial heat doesn't hit directly on the sugar, because if it does, what we would generate would be caramel. So it's important to stir our mixture. And once the sugar and acids dissolve well, we let our cordial cool and it's ready. Once it comes to a boil and becomes completely transparent, we have our citrus cordial. We remove it from the heat, let it cool, and then we bottle it and it's ready. What we're going to do now, having made our citrus cordial, is the raspberry tincture. What is a tincture? Basically, it's a technique that allows us to transfer the active properties of any ingredient we want from solid to liquid, which in this case will be the raspberry. The first thing we're going to do is add 180 grams of fresh raspberry into a vacuum bag. And as a solvent, we're going to use a neutral alcohol, in this case vodka. Our faithful friend, also for this case, we're going to use the same amount, equal parts.
If we have 180 grams of raspberry, we're going to go with 180 milliliters of vodka.
We have our 180 grams of raspberry, our 180 milliliters of vodka.
What are we going to do now?
We are going to take it to sous vide. What is sous vide? It is a cooking method that allows us to maintain a constant temperature for as long as we want. We'll do it at 60 degrees, a quite low temperature. Why? If we go over 60 degrees, we break the typical bond of vodka and it stops being alcohol. Okay? First of all, we are going to vacuum seal our little bag. Boom! We already have our raspberry vacuum sealed along with the vodka. What we're going to do now is bring it to 60 degrees for 5 hours. What can you do during those 5 hours?
A lot of things.
I leave it to your discretion.
Bye!
It's been 5 hours. We now have our raspberry dye. What are we going to do now? We're going to filter it. In this case, we're going to use a typical stainless steel coffee strainer. We're going to filter to separate the solid from the liquid.
And wait.
Once our tincture is done filtering, we're going to use a dropper so we can handle it better in our cocktail. We have our raspberry tincture ready. Alright, we have our citrus cordial, we have our raspberry tincture. What are we missing? The lime foam. How are we going to make our lime foam? We're going to add it to our blender cup. First thing we're going to do is add 200 milliliters of very fresh, freshly squeezed lemon juice, please. We're going to add 200 milliliters of lime juice. We're going to use both in this case to have a more complex flavor. We know that while lime and lemon are similar, they have their differences. Lime also gives us a little more sweetness, more fruity, and the very Argentine lemon. We're gonna add 100 milliliters of syrup to give our foam a little body, and finally to thicken our mix and generate this foam and allow us to capture all the bubbles that we're going to add from the nitrogen. We're going to add gum arabic. What is gum arabic? An emulsifier, a stabilizer?
How much gum arabic are we going to add?
Just 2 grams. It's important that in this case we have a very precise scale. As if we go over 0.5 grams, the difference will really be noticeable. And now that we have all the ingredients, we're going to blend them. Now that we have completely blended and homogenized our mixture, we're going to transfer it to our creamer. What is a creamer? A creamer is this. It's a little device that's widely used in cooking to generate foams, airs. We're going to put our mixture in it and add a charge of nitrogen. What does that mean? That having previously added the gum arabic, this is going to help us trap all the nitrogen, all the bubbles, so that we can create our cream. We add the mixture, close it, and now we add a charge of nitrogen. Perfect. Once we've charged it, we're going to put it in the freezer for just half an hour to stabilize the mixture and make our cream firm. Okay, we have all our ingredients, so we're going to start making our caipirinha. In this case, we're not going to beat it. We're going to make it directly in the glass. We're going to make it refreshed. Why are we going to make it refreshed? Because we're going to give our cocktail an excess of water to open it up, to open all its aromatic notes to make it fresher. But we also don't want the typical excess water that is given in a shake, which is much greater than if we refresh it. So in this case, we're going to use a Dutch vodka with floral, citrus, minty notes on the nose, and a smoky finish on the palate that's going to give it a bomb complexity. How much vodka are we going to add? 45 milliliters. We also have our cold bottled citrus cordial here. We're going to add 22 milliliters in this case, maintaining the 2:1 ratio we talked about earlier. That is 2 parts vodka, 1 part of our cordial. Once we have our ingredients, what we're going to do is refresh with whole ice. We don't refresh with crushed ice so that we don't dilute so much ice and give so much excess water in our cocktail. And we refresh. How long does it refresh? This is a subject. Many suggest 12, 15, or 20 seconds.
It's until it's cold.
Perfect. Typical caipirinha glass. And in this case, as I told you that for elevated, we are going to use a completely crystalline ice, free of impurities. And why do we choose this ice? Firstly, it's going to take much longer to dilute, so it's not going to give us too much excess water. That's why I also already refreshed it. I already gave it the excess water that I seek by refreshing it already in the glass. I don't need more. That's why we are going to use this type of ice, and apart from being completely free of impurities and gases, it's not going to modify the taste at all. We have the cold glass, we have our ice, and now we are going to serve. How are we going to proceed? We are going to add our raspberry tincture that we made all around the edge to generate a beautiful flow. Very well. We have our raspberry flow, and now we are going to finish it with our lime foam. And now we rise. Tremendous. The foam really gives a lot more texture to the cocktail. It comes in like air, and the bubbles transport all the flavors, so it really is an explosion of flavor on the palate. First, you get the foam with that air that opens up all the aromas. Then you feel the raspberry, giving it a completely more fruity note. And finally, the citrus vodka. Completely transparent, beautiful, it's crazy. We've made the 3 levels of the Caipiroska, the classic, the bosses, and the bosses, the elevated ones. I hope you dare to make it. Don't be lazy, you won't regret it. Thank you.